It started on a crisp fall evening. The golden leaves fluttered down as I rocked my 6-month-old daughter, Emily, to sleep. My wife, Claire, had been distant for weeks, always on her phone, always with an excuse. Tonight was no different. She said she was meeting a friend for dinner, but I'd stopped believing her vague explanations. My suspicions had been growing, but I wanted to trust her. After all, we were a family now, and I thought that counted for something. But when I found her suitcase in the trunk of her car earlier that day, packed with clothes she hadn't worn in months, I knew the truth I'd been avoiding was about to surface. When Claire returned late that night, I was sitting in the living room, Emily's baby monitor glowing faintly on the coffee table. She hesitated in the doorway, her face pale as she met my gaze. "You're up," she said, her voice brittle. "I am," I replied, keeping my tone calm. "We need to talk." Her shoulders stiffened, but she tried to play it off. "Can it wait? I'm exhausted." "No, it can't." I motioned for her to sit. She didn't. Instead, she crossed her arms defensively. "Why is your suitcase in the car, Claire?" Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she was speechless. Then she stammered, "It's not what you think." "Really? Because it looks like you're planning to leave. Or maybe you already have." Her silence was deafening, confirming my worst fears. I just needed a break," she finally said, her voice shaking. "I'm overwhelmed, okay? Motherhood, this house, everything. I needed to feel like myself again. And you think disappearing for a few days without a word is the answer? Leaving Emily?" Her lips trembled, but she didn't deny it. "I wasn't leaving her for good. Who is he, Claire?" Her face crumpled, and she let out a small, broken gasp. "It doesn't matter. It's over." "No, Claire, it's not over. Because you were ready to leave your child for him." She sank onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I love you. I love Emily, but I've been so lost. He made me feel seen again." I stared at her, my heart breaking for our family, for Emily, who didn't deserve this. "You think running off to feel seen is an excuse to abandon your child? Claire, you don't just get to check out when things get hard. That's not how this works." Her sobs filled the room, but I didn't waver. "I'll take care of Emily, but you need to decide what kind of mother and wife you want to be. Because this," I gestured between us, "isn't sustainable." She looked up at me, stunned and speechless. For once, she had no defense, no argument, just the weight of her choices settling heavily around her. Claire didn't go on her trip. Instead, she stayed. But things didn't magically fix themselves. Trust takes time to rebuild, if it ever does. That night marked a turning point, not just for Claire, but for me. It reminded me that love isn't enough without commitment, and sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that protect what truly matters. For me, that was Emily, and always would be. In the weeks that followed, Claire and I lived in a strange silence. She slept in the guest room, and our conversations were limited to Emily's care or household logistics. It wasn't just a betrayal that haunted me. It was the sheer recklessness of her actions. I couldn't understand how she could even consider leaving Emily behind, even for a moment. Claire began therapy almost immediately, both individual and couples counseling. She insisted she wanted to fix things, but I wasn't sure if I was ready. Trust isn't something you can snap back into place. Every time she left the house, even for something mundane, I wondered if she'd really be back. One night, after Emily had gone to sleep and the house was quiet, Claire knocked on the door of the living room where I was sitting. "Can I talk to you?" she asked hesitantly. I nodded, though my guard was still up. She sat down across from me, her face pale but determined. "I've been doing a lot of thinking and a lot of listening in therapy. I know I can't take back what I did. I can't undo the hurt I caused you or Emily. But I want to try." Her words were heavy, laced with regret, but I still needed clarity. "Why, Claire? Why did you do it?" She exhaled shakily, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. I felt invisible. After Emily was born, everything became about her, and I get it, I really do. She's our daughter. But I didn't know how to ask for help or how to tell you that I was drowning. And then someone came along and he noticed me. It was wrong. I know that now. I just wanted to escape the person I felt I'd become. Her confession was raw, but it didn't absolve her. Do you think I haven't felt overwhelmed, Claire? Do you think I haven't felt invisible? I've been here every day, trying to keep us afloat. You could have talked to me. You should have talked to me. I know, she whispered. I should have, but I didn't, and now I've hurt you. I've hurt us. All I can do is try to be better. For you, for Emily, for myself. There was a long silence between us, the kind that holds years of unspoken words. Finally, I spoke. Claire, I need time. Time to figure out if I can trust you again. Time to see if we can rebuild this. But more than anything, I need to see that you're committed to being here. Not just physically, but emotionally. For me, and especially for Emily. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I'll do whatever it takes. I promise. From that point, the road ahead was anything but easy. We attended counseling together, but I made it clear I was doing it for Emily more than for us. If we couldn't make it work, I needed to know we'd tried everything before giving up. Slowly, Claire began to change. She was more present, more patient, and more willing to admit her flaws. She became the mother Emily needed, and while the wounds in our marriage were still fresh, I couldn't deny the effort she was putting in. As for me, I focused on Emily. She was my anchor through the storm, the reason I got up every morning and kept going. Her laughter reminded me that, no matter what happened between Claire and me, she deserved a stable, loving home. Months passed, and while things weren't perfect, they were better. Trust was still a fragile thing. But Claire had shown me that she was willing to fight for our family. One evening, as we watched Emily take her first wobbly steps across the living room, Claire looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For not giving up on us. For giving me a chance to be better." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I picked up Emily and held her close. I didn't do it for you, Claire. I did it for her. And maybe, just maybe, for the hope that we could still find our way back. And in that moment, I realized the hope was still there, fragile but alive. It wouldn't be easy, but for Emily's sake, it was worth trying. The months turned into a year, and as Emily grew, so did the distance between the person Claire had been during the affair and the person she was striving to become. The wounds in our marriage had begun to heal. Those scars remained, visible reminders of what we'd endured. Claire continued therapy, not just for our relationship, but for herself. She delved deep into the emotions and insecurities that had led her to make such destructive choices. I admired her willingness to face those parts of herself, though admiration didn't always translate into forgiveness. Meanwhile, I wrestled with my own feelings. There were moments when trust felt like an impossible hill to climb. I'd catch myself overthinking her every move, scrutinizing her phone calls or her occasional nights out with friends. But then there were moments of clarity, like the way she would cradle Emily during bedtime stories, or the way she'd laugh at my terrible dad jokes when I saw glimpses of the woman I fell in love with. One night, after Emily had gone to bed, Claire and I sat together on the back porch. The air was cool, filled with the scent of blooming jasmine, and the sky was dotted with stars. "I've been thinking," Claire began hesitantly, breaking the comfortable silence. "About what?" I asked, sipping from my mug of tea. "About us. About everything we've been through." She paused, then looked at me, her expression earnest. "I know I've said this before, but I need you to know how truly sorry I am. For all of it. For breaking your trust. For putting you in a position where you had to question everything." I set my mug down, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "I know you're sorry, Claire, and I see how hard you're working to make things right. But it's still complicated." She nodded, her gaze dropping to her hands. "I understand. I just hope you know that I'll keep fighting for us, no matter how long it takes." Her sincerity was undeniable, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Not just for Emily's sake, but for us. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. "And I'm trying, too. Every day, I'm trying." She reached out, her hand brushing against mine. I didn't pull away. Instead, I laced my fingers with hers, a small gesture that carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. As the days turned into years, Claire and I rebuilt our marriage piece by piece. It wasn't perfect, no relationship is, but it was real. We learned to communicate better, to share our fears and frustrations without judgment, and we learned to forgive not just each other but ourselves. Emily became the glue that held us together, her laughter a constant reminder of why we fought so hard to stay a family. Watching her grow, I realized that the most important lesson Claire and I could teach her wasn't about perfection, but perseverance. Life moved forward, and so did we. There were still challenges, moments of doubt, but they were outweighed by the love we'd rediscovered. And one day, as Claire and I stood hand in hand watching Emily play in the backyard, I realized something profound. The pain of the past no longer defined us. We weren't the same people we'd been before the affair, and that was okay. In fact, it was better, because through the struggle, we found a deeper understanding of ourselves and each other, a foundation stronger than the one we'd built before. Claire turned to me and smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude. "We made it," she said softly. I squeezed her hand and nodded. "Yeah, we did, and for the first time in a long time, I believed it.